Lieutenant Commander Alex Morgan had processed exactly 47 high-security prisoners during his 5-year assignment to the Horizons detention facility, and not once had any of them made him feel like he was about to step into a conversation that would fundamentally alter his understanding of his own past. The security briefing had been routine enough. Queen Lyralii of the Zephyrian Confederation, captured during the failed rebellion on Andromeda's Prime, classified as a war criminal pending tribunal hearings, and assigned to his facility pending final disposition by Federation Command. Another defeated enemy leader who would spend her days in containment while lawyers argued about jurisdiction and sentencing guidelines. Alex approached the maximum security holding cell with the professional detachment that had made him effective at managing dangerous prisoners who might try everything from bribery to psychological manipulation to achieve escape or preferential treatment. The cell's energy barriers hummed softly as Alex activated the viewing portal, expecting to see either defiant rage or broken despair, the two emotional states that characterized most captured leaders who found themselves transitioning from absolute power to absolute vulnerability. Instead, he found Queen Lyralii sitting calmly on the standard-issue detention bench, her posture suggesting patience rather than resignation. Her silver skin caught the cell's lighting in subtle patterns, and her pointed ears moved slightly as she tracked sounds beyond human hearing range. The restraints around her wrists seemed almost incongruous with her serene demeanor, as if she were simply resting between more important activities. When she looked up at his approach, Alex felt something electric pass between them that had nothing to do with the cell's security systems and everything to do with recognition that touched something deeper than professional awareness. "I know you," Queen Lyralii said simply, her voice carrying musical harmonics that seemed familiar in ways Alex couldn't immediately place. The words hit Alex like a quantum shock, triggering fragmented images that flashed through his consciousness too quickly to examine: desert landscapes under alien stars, the sound of children crying, the smell of smoke and ozone, and the feeling of someone standing beside him during a crisis whose details remained frustratingly out of reach. "Ma'am," Alex said carefully, maintaining the professional tone that prisoner protocols required, "I don't believe we've met before. I'm Lieutenant Commander Morgan, and I'll be overseeing your detention during your stay aboard the Horizon." Queen Lyralii's smile was gentle enough to dissolve hull plating. Kepler 442b. The evacuation of Meridian City. 3 years, 4 months, 16 days ago. The memories crashed over Alex like a tidal wave of recognition. Suddenly he could see it clearly. The bombed-out refugee camp, the desperate families trying to reach Federation transport ships, the rebel commander who had appeared out of nowhere to help coordinate safe passage through territory controlled by hostile forces. "You had a different name then," Alex said, his professional composure cracking as the full scope of their shared experience came flooding back. "Commander Lyra," she confirmed. "And you were Staff Sergeant Morgan, 3rd Humanitarian Corps, working 16-hour days to evacuate civilians while the politicians argued about jurisdiction and resource allocation." Alex felt reality shift around him as he processed the fact that the war criminal in his custody was the same person who had spent 3 days and nights helping him save thousands of innocent lives during one of the Federation's most chaotic evacuation operations. "The children's transport," he said, remembering one of the most dangerous parts of their mission. "You volunteered to escort them through the combat zone personally." "You argued with me about it," Queen Lyralii replied, her eyes showing the same steady determination he remembered from that desperate mission. "Said it was too dangerous for a civilian leader to risk herself for operational necessity. And you told me that operational necessity meant nothing if we couldn't protect the people who trusted us to get them to safety." Queen Lyralii nodded, her expression growing more serious. "Alex, do you remember what else I told you during that mission?" Alex searched his recovered memories, finding fragments of conversations held during brief moments of rest between evacuating refugee groups. "You said that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought between armies, but between people who want to help and systems that make helping difficult. And do you remember what you said?" Alex felt something cold settle in his stomach as he recalled his response to her observation about systemic barriers to humanitarian action. "I said that good people find ways to do the right thing regardless of what the systems tell them." Queen Lyralii's smile was radiant enough to power the ship's navigation systems. Yes. You did. The implications of their shared memory hit Alex like a collision with a small moon. The woman in his custody wasn't just someone he'd worked with during a crisis, she was someone who had shaped his understanding of moral obligation under impossible circumstances. Alex, Queen Lyralii said quietly, do you know why I was really captured? The briefing material said you coordinated attacks against Federation infrastructure. I coordinated resistance against Federation policies that prioritized resource extraction over indigenous population survival, Queen Lyralii corrected gently. The infrastructure we targeted was being used to displace civilian populations without adequate relocation support. Alex studied her face, noting how her expression carried the same calm determination he remembered from their evacuation mission. You were protecting civilians again. I was trying to. Just like you were, 3 years ago. Before Alex could respond to that observation, the detention facility's communication system activated with Dr. Sarah Chen's voice carrying urgent undertones. Alex, you need to come to the command center immediately. We've received new orders regarding the prisoners' handling. Alex looked at Queen Lyralii, who was watching him with patient attention that suggested she understood the choice he was about to face. Your Majesty, he said formally, though the title felt strange when applied to someone he remembered sharing military rations with during humanitarian crisis, I'll be back to discuss your detention conditions. Alex, Queen Lyralii said as he turned to leave, whatever they're planning, remember that some recognitions go deeper than memory. They're about knowing who someone really is underneath all the roles and assignments. As Alex made his way to the command center, he couldn't shake the feeling that Queen Lyralii's recognition of him was about to become a test of whether he still recognized himself. The person he'd been 3 years ago would have known exactly what to do. The question was whether the person he'd become through years of following orders would remember how to choose conscience over convenience when the choice became unavoidable. I know you, she had said. And Alex was beginning to suspect that the most important question wasn't how she knew him, but whether he still knew who he wanted to be. The command center briefing room felt smaller than usual when Dr. Sarah Chen activated the holographic displays showing Alex's new orders regarding Queen Lyralii's detention, along with the classified files that explained why those orders had been upgraded from standard prisoner management to enhanced security protocols. Alex, Sarah said, her expression mixing concern with the kind of professional worry that came from reviewing documentation that didn't quite add up, these new directives are coming directly from Federation intelligence. Specifically, Commander Vex's Psychological Operations Division. Alex studied the orders while trying to reconcile the official narrative with his recovered memories of working alongside Queen Lyralii during humanitarian operations. What kind of enhanced security protocols? Isolation from all external communication, preparation for intensive interrogation procedures, and... Sarah paused, consulting her notes with obvious reluctance, authorization for whatever methods Commander Vex deems necessary to extract strategic intelligence. Strategic intelligence about what? Alex asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Rebel network operations, financial support structures, and coordination methods for future resistance activities, Sarah read from the official documentation. The Federation believes Queen Lyralii possesses information that could prevent additional civilian casualties. Alex felt something dark settle in his chest as he processed the implications of those orders. Sarah, have you reviewed the specific charges against Queen Lyralii? Terrorism, sedition, destruction of Federation property, and coordination of illegal military activities, Sarah replied. Pretty standard war crimes allegations. And the specifics of those activities? Sarah activated additional displays showing incident reports, damage assessments, and casualty figures. Sabotage of mining operations on 3 different worlds, disruption of resource extraction protocols, and interference with lawful Federation economic activities. Alex studied the data while his memories of Kepler 442b provided context that the official report seemed to lack. Sarah, do these reports mention civilian populations? Not specifically, no. Why? Because the mining operations Queen Lyralii targeted were displacing indigenous communities without adequate relocation support, Alex said, his voice gaining edge as he began to understand the political dynamics behind Queen Lyralii's imprisonment. She wasn't attacking Federation infrastructure for strategic advantage. She was protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. Sarah looked at him with growing concern. Alex, how do you know that? Alex made a decision that would probably complicate his career but felt necessary for his conscience. Because I worked with her before. 3 years ago, during the Kepler 442b evacuation. She spent 72 hours helping me save thousands of refugees from a war zone. She helped you save refugees? Sarah's expression shifted from professional concern to personal confusion. Alex, are you telling me that the war criminal in our detention facility is someone you consider a humanitarian ally? I'm telling you that the person in our detention facility has spent years risking her life to protect civilians from policies that prioritize corporate profits over human welfare. Before Sarah could respond to that revelation, the briefing room doors hissed open and Commander Vex entered with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested he'd been monitoring their conversation and was prepared to address any concerns that might interfere with his operational objectives. Lieutenant Commander Morgan, Vex said, his voice carrying the flat tones of someone accustomed to having his authority unquestioned, I understand you have previous contact with the prisoner. Sir, Alex replied, maintaining military courtesy while his mind raced through the implications of Vex's knowledge of his history with Queen Lyralii. I encountered Queen Lyralii during humanitarian operations on Kepler 442b. Encounter which you failed to report in your initial prisoner assessment, Vex observed, consulting a data pad that apparently contained comprehensive background information on Alex's service record. Sir, I didn't immediately recognize the connection. The prisoner was operating under a different identity during our previous contact. Commander Vex moved closer, his expression showing the kind of analytical attention that Alex associated with psychological operations specialists who were trained to identify emotional vulnerabilities for strategic exploitation. Lieutenant Commander, your previous contact with the prisoner could be valuable for our interrogation procedures. Personal connections often provide leverage for extracting information that standard techniques cannot access. Alex felt ice form in his veins as he understood what Commander Vex was suggesting. Sir, are you asking me to use my personal relationship with Queen Lyralii to facilitate enhanced interrogation? I'm asking you to utilize all available resources to ensure that critical intelligence is obtained through the most efficient means possible. Sarah stepped forward with obvious diplomatic concern. Commander Vex, if Lieutenant Commander Morgan has personal history with the prisoner, wouldn't that create potential conflicts of interest regarding objective assessment? Dr. Chen, personal history creates opportunity for psychological manipulation that objective assessment cannot achieve, Vex replied. The prisoner's emotional connection to Lieutenant Commander Morgan represents a vulnerability that can be exploited for strategic advantage. Alex looked between Commander Vex and Dr. Chen, realizing that he was facing a choice between using his relationship with Queen Lyralii as a weapon against her or refusing orders that came from legitimate military authority. Commander, Alex said carefully, what specific intelligence do you believe Queen Lyralii possesses? Information regarding rebel financial networks, coordination protocols for future resistance operations, and identification of Federation personnel who may have been compromised by enemy recruitment. And if she doesn't possess that information? Commander Vex's smile was sharp enough to cut through diplomatic protocol. Lieutenant Commander, everyone possesses information that becomes valuable under appropriate interrogation conditions. The question is simply how much pressure is required to access that information. Alex felt his memories of Queen Lyralii helping evacuate refugee children clash violently with the image of her being subjected to appropriate interrogation conditions designed to extract information she might not even have. Sir, he said, his voice carrying undertones that probably violated several military regulations regarding respectful communication with superior officers, I request clarification regarding the rules of engagement for prisoner interrogation. The rules of engagement are whatever methods prove necessary to obtain critical intelligence, Commander Vex replied. Your personal relationship with the prisoner simply provides additional options for achieving that objective. Sarah was studying both men with growing understanding of the moral territory they were entering. Commander Vex, are you authorizing enhanced interrogation techniques against a prisoner who has not been formally convicted of the charges against her? Dar. Chen, I am authorizing intelligence-gathering procedures against a captured enemy leader who possesses information that could save Federation lives. Alex realized that Commander Vex's definition of saving Federation lives probably didn't include protecting the civilian populations that Queen Lyralii had been defending. Commander, Alex said, I need to understand the broader context of Queen Lyralii's activities. If she was protecting civilian populations from harmful policies, that would affect the moral framework for how we approach intelligence gathering. Lieutenant Commander Morgan, Commander Vex said, his voice gaining dangerous edge, the moral framework for intelligence gathering is determined by the strategic value of information obtained, not by sentimental assessment of enemy motivations. As Alex listened to Commander Vex dismiss moral considerations as sentimental assessment, he realized that Queen Lyralii's recognition of him was about to become a test of whether he still remembered the difference between following orders and doing what was right. Sir, Alex said, I'd like to review the complete case files regarding Queen Lyralii's activities before proceeding with any interrogation procedures. Lieutenant Commander, you'll proceed with interrogation procedures using whatever methods prove most effective. Your personal feelings about the prisoner's motivations are irrelevant to operational requirements. Alex looked at Sarah, who was clearly struggling with the same moral discomfort that was making Alex question everything about his role in Queen Lyralii's detention. Understood, sir, Alex said, though his tone suggested understanding without agreement. As Commander Vex left to finalize his interrogation preparations, Alex realized that the person he'd been 3 years ago would never have cooperated with using humanitarian connection as a tool for psychological manipulation. The question was whether the person he'd become was still capable of choosing conscience over career when the choice became unavoidable. The decision Alex had been dreading arrived at precisely 1,400 hours ship time, when Commander Vex summoned him to the enhanced interrogation facility that had been hastily configured in the Horizon Secure section specifically for extracting information from Queen Lyralii. Lieutenant Commander Morgan, Vex announced as Alex entered the sterile chamber where Queen Lyralii sat restrained in equipment designed to monitor everything from biometric responses to neural activity patterns. You will establish emotional rapport with the prisoner to facilitate information extraction. Alex looked at Queen Lyralii, who met his gaze with the same steady composure she'd shown during their refugee evacuation mission, despite being connected to monitoring devices that would register every fluctuation in her emotional state. Your Majesty, Alex said formally, trying to maintain professional distance while his conscience screamed warnings about participating in psychological manipulation of someone who had once risked her life to help him save innocent people. Hello, Alex, Queen Lyralii replied, her voice carrying the same calm warmth he remembered from their shared mission. I was wondering when they would ask you to betray the person you used to be. Commander Vex stepped forward with obvious satisfaction. The prisoner demonstrates emotional attachment to you, Lieutenant Commander. Proceed with establishing deeper psychological connection. Alex felt something fundamental shift in his chest as he realized that Queen Lyralii understood exactly what was happening and was somehow trying to protect him from the moral compromise he was being asked to make. Commander Vex, Alex said carefully, what specific information are we seeking from Queen Lyralii? Financial networks supporting rebel operations, communication protocols for coordinating resistance activities, and identification of Federation personnel who may have been compromised. Alex looked at Queen Lyralii, whose expression suggested she was entirely willing to discuss those topics if approached honestly rather than through manipulation. Your Majesty, Alex said, Commander Vex believes you possess strategic intelligence that could affect Federation security. Are you willing to discuss your resistance activities? Of course, Queen Lyralii replied immediately. Though I suspect my definition of resistance activities differs significantly from Commander Vex's understanding. Commander Vex activated recording equipment with obvious anticipation. Proceed with information extraction, Lieutenant Commander. Alex felt the weight of moral choice settling on his shoulders as he realized that Queen Lyralii was offering to cooperate, but Commander Vex expected him to use psychological manipulation tactics to extract information that might not even exist. Queen Lyralii, Alex said, can you explain the motivations behind your resistance activities? I coordinated efforts to protect civilian populations from Federation policies that prioritized corporate resource extraction over indigenous population welfare, Queen Lyralii replied with complete honesty. The resistance activities involved documenting human rights violations, organizing legal challenges to harmful policies, and providing emergency assistance to communities threatened by displacement. Commander Vex interrupted with obvious frustration. Lieutenant Commander, you're allowing the prisoner to control the narrative. Use your personal connection to access information about military operations and financial support structures. Alex looked at Queen Lyralii, who was watching him with patient attention that suggested she trusted him to make the right choice despite the institutional pressure he was facing. Alex, she said quietly, do you remember what we promised each other during the evacuation mission? The memory came flooding back, during their most dangerous night, when they'd been trapped between hostile forces while protecting a group of injured refugees, they had promised each other that they would never compromise their commitment to protecting innocent people, regardless of what their respective chains of command might demand. I remember, Alex said, his voice carrying new resolve. Then you understand that some promises matter more than orders. Commander Vex moved closer to the monitoring equipment, clearly preparing to escalate his interrogation methods when he realized that Alex's personal connection wasn't producing the results he expected. Lieutenant Commander, Vex said, his voice gaining dangerous edge, if emotional rapport proves insufficient for information extraction, we have authorization for enhanced persuasion techniques. Alex felt ice form in his veins as he understood that Commander Vex was threatening to torture Queen Lyralii if psychological manipulation failed to produce the intelligence he wanted. Commander, Alex said, Queen Lyralii has been cooperative with information sharing. What additional intelligence do you believe enhanced techniques would produce? Intelligence that she's withholding due to misplaced loyalty to enemy operations. What if she doesn't possess the intelligence you're seeking? Commander Vex's smile was sharp enough to cut through hull plating. Lieutenant Commander, enhanced interrogation techniques are designed to access information that subjects don't realize they possess. Physical stress often clarifies memory and eliminates selective recall. Alex looked at Queen Lyralii, whose expression remained calm despite the obvious threat to her welfare, and realized that she was more concerned about his moral position than her own safety. Alex, she said softly, remember who you are. Not who they're asking you to become. Before Alex could respond, the interrogation facility's doors hissed open and Dr. Sarah Chen entered with the expression of someone who had discovered information that changed everything about the situation they were facing. Commander Vex, Sarah announced, her voice carrying the kind of professional authority that came from having access to information that superior officers needed. I've completed analysis of the case files regarding Queen Lyralii's activities. Dr. Chen, you were not authorized to conduct independent analysis of classified materials. I was authorized to provide medical consultation regarding prisoner welfare, Sarah corrected. And my analysis suggests that the charges against Queen Lyralii may be based on incomplete or deliberately misleading information. Sarah activated holographic displays that filled the interrogation chamber with comprehensive data about the mining operations Queen Lyralii had opposed, the civilian populations affected by those operations, and the corporate interests that had requested her capture. The resistance activities Commander Vex describes as terrorism were actually humanitarian efforts to document and prevent forced displacement of indigenous communities, Sarah announced. Queen Lyralii's so-called attacks on Federation infrastructure were targeted interventions to prevent environmental disasters that would have killed thousands of civilians. Commander Vex moved toward the data displays with obvious agitation. Dr. Chen, enemy propaganda frequently disguises military operations as humanitarian activities. These aren't propaganda claims, Sarah replied firmly. These are Federation environmental impact assessments that were classified to prevent interference with corporate resource extraction schedules. Alex studied the data with growing understanding of why Queen Lyralii had been captured. Sarah, are you saying that Queen Lyralii was imprisoned for preventing environmental catastrophes? I'm saying that Queen Lyralii was imprisoned because her humanitarian efforts interfered with corporate profits, and those corporations have sufficient political influence to classify their critics as enemy combatants. Queen Lyralii looked at Alex with an expression that mixed vindication with sadness. Do you understand now why I wasn't surprised to see you here? The Federation uses good people to enforce bad policies by telling them they're protecting the greater good. Commander Vex stepped forward with obvious determination to salvage his interrogation objectives. Regardless of the prisoner's motivations, she still possesses intelligence regarding resistance networks that could threaten Federation security. What if those resistance networks are protecting civilians from policies that violate Federation humanitarian principles? Alex asked. Lieutenant Commander, your personal feelings about Federation policy are irrelevant to intelligence-gathering requirements. Alex looked at Queen Lyralii, whose steady gaze reminded him of every promise he'd made during their shared mission about protecting innocent people regardless of institutional pressure. Commander Vex, Alex said, his voice carrying the kind of quiet authority that came from finally remembering who he wanted to be, I cannot participate in enhanced interrogation of someone whose only crime was preventing environmental disasters that would have killed thousands of civilians. Lieutenant Commander Morgan, you are refusing direct orders. I'm following higher orders, Alex corrected. The ones that say Federation personnel are obligated to protect innocent lives, even when protecting those lives conflicts with corporate interests. As Alex stood between Commander Vex and Queen Lyralii, he realized that her recognition of him had been both a gift and a challenge, the gift of remembering who he used to be, and the challenge of choosing to become that person again when it mattered most. The moment Alex refused Commander Vex's interrogation orders, the detention facility transformed from a place of routine prisoner management into the center of a moral crisis that would determine not just Queen Lyralii's fate, but the direction of Alex's entire career and conscience. Lieutenant Commander Morgan, Commander Vex said, his voice carrying the kind of cold authority that suggested Alex had just crossed a line that would have permanent consequences, you are in direct violation of lawful orders issued by Federation Intelligence Command. Sir, Alex replied, positioning himself between Commander Vex and Queen Lyralii, I am following Federation humanitarian protocols that supersede intelligence-gathering directives when prisoner welfare is at stake. Prisoner welfare is not your concern. Information extraction is your mission. Alex looked at Queen Lyralii, whose expression showed something that looked remarkably like pride mixed with concern for the professional risks he was taking to protect her from torture disguised as intelligence gathering. Commander Vex, Dr. Sarah Chen interjected, stepping forward with her holographic displays still showing evidence of the corporate conspiracy behind Queen Lyralii's imprisonment, we need to discuss the legal implications of enhanced interrogation when the underlying charges appear to be fraudulent. Dr. Chen, the legality of charges is determined by tribunal proceedings, not by medical personnel conducting unauthorized analysis of classified materials. Actually, Sarah said, activating additional data displays with the confidence of someone who had spent the night conducting comprehensive research into Federation legal precedents, medical personnel have authority to intervene when prisoner treatment violates established humanitarian standards. And what humanitarian standards are you invoking? The ones that prohibit torture of individuals whose activities serve Federation humanitarian principles, even when those activities conflicted with corporate economic interests. Commander Vex moved closer to Alex with obvious intention to physically remove him from his protective position between the interrogation equipment and Queen Lyralii. Lieutenant Commander, step aside. That's a direct order. Alex felt every choice he'd ever made about duty, conscience, and moral obligation crystallize into this single moment of decision. No, sir. You're refusing a direct order from a superior officer. I'm following the oath I took when I joined the Federation military, Alex said, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. The oath that says I will protect innocent lives, defend humanitarian principles, and serve the greater good of civilized society. Queen Lyralii spoke from her restraints with the same calm authority Alex remembered from their refugee evacuation mission. Commander Vex, I'm willing to answer any questions you have about my resistance activities. But I want honesty about what information you're actually seeking. Commander Vex turned toward her with predatory attention. You want honesty? We need the financial networks that funded your operations, the communication protocols that coordinated your attacks, and the names of Federation personnel who provided intelligence support. The financial networks were refugee assistance funds established by humanitarian organizations, Queen Lyralii replied immediately. The communication protocols were standard civilian emergency coordination systems. And the Federation personnel who provided support were people like Alex, who understood that preventing environmental disasters serves Federation interests better than protecting corporate profits. You're admitting to corrupting Federation military personnel. I'm admitting to working with Federation personnel who prioritize their humanitarian obligations over their corporate instructions. Alex realized that Queen Lyralii was using her interrogation as an opportunity to expose the moral contradictions in Commander Vex's mission while simultaneously protecting the people who had helped her save civilian lives. Commander Vex, Alex said, Queen Lyralii is providing complete cooperation with information sharing. What additional intelligence do you believe torture would produce? Intelligence about future resistance operations and potential threats to Federation security. What if her resistance operations were preventing threats to Federation security? Sarah asked, highlighting data that showed how Queen Lyralii's environmental interventions had prevented disasters that would have killed thousands of Federation citizens. Commander Vex studied the environmental data with obvious frustration as he realized that his interrogation target was actually someone whose activities had protected rather than threatened Federation welfare. Regardless of past activities, he said finally, the prisoner possesses information about resistance networks that could threaten future operations. What if those resistance networks are protecting people from policies that violate Federation principles? Alex asked. Federation principles are determined by Federation command, not by enemy propagandists or misguided military personnel. Queen Lyralii looked at Alex with an expression that mixed affection with something deeper. Alex, do you remember what I told you during our last night on Kepler 442b? Alex felt the memory surface with perfect clarity. After they had successfully evacuated the final group of refugees, Queen Lyralii had told him that the most important battles weren't fought between armies, but between people who wanted to help in systems that made helping difficult. You said that sometimes good people have to choose between serving institutions and serving the values those institutions claim to represent. And what did you say? Alex looked around the interrogation facility at the equipment designed to extract information through psychological manipulation, at Commander Vex who viewed humanitarian efforts as enemy operations, and at Sarah who was risking her career to expose the truth about corporate influence on Federation policy. I said that when institutions lose track of their values, it's up to individual people to remember what those values were supposed to accomplish. Queen Lyralii's smile was radiant enough to power the ship's navigation systems. Alex, that's why I knew you. Not because I recognized your face, but because I recognized your character. Commander Vex activated emergency communication protocols with obvious intention to report Alex's insubordination to Federation command before the situation could deteriorate further from his perspective. Security to detention facility. I need personnel to arrest Lieutenant Commander Morgan for refusing lawful orders and interfering with intelligence operations. Actually, said Captain Morrison's voice through the ship's communication system, you need to report to my ready room immediately, Commander Vex. Along with Lieutenant Commander Morgan and Dr. Chen. Captain, I am conducting authorized intelligence gathering under direct orders from Federation Command. Commander, you are conducting unauthorized interrogation of a prisoner whose case has been referred to Federation Humanitarian Review Board based on evidence that the charges against her may be fraudulent. Alex felt reality shift around him as he realized that Sarah's research had reached Captain Morrison, who apparently possessed both the authority and the courage to challenge Commander Vex's interrogation methods. Captain Morrison, Queen Lyralii said, speaking toward the communication system, I formally request political asylum under Federation humanitarian protection protocols. Your Majesty, Captain Morrison replied, asylum request acknowledged and pending review. Commander Vex, you are ordered to cease all interrogation activities and report for immediate consultation. Captain, I am operating under direct authorization from Federation Intelligence Command, Vex protested. Commander, you are operating aboard my vessel, and Federation Intelligence Command does not supersede my authority regarding prisoner welfare when humanitarian violations are alleged. Alex watched Commander Vex process the fact that his interrogation mission had just collided with a captain who apparently took Federation humanitarian principles more seriously than corporate political pressure. Lieutenant Commander Morgan, Captain Morrison continued, you and Dr. Chen will escort Queen Lyralii to secure quarters pending resolution of her asylum request. Commander Vex, you have 5 minutes to transfer all relevant files to my personal review. As security personnel arrived to implement Captain Morrison's orders rather than Commander Vex, Alex realized that Queen Lyralii's recognition of him had triggered something much larger than personal moral choice. Alex, Queen Lyralii said as he began the process of transferring her from interrogation restraints to protective custody, do you understand what just happened? You exposed a conspiracy to use intelligence gathering as cover for protecting corporate interests over humanitarian concerns, Alex replied, helping her to her feet with the same care he'd shown during their refugee evacuation mission. More than that, Sarah said, consulting her data displays with obvious satisfaction. Queen Lyralii demonstrated that Federation personnel can choose conscience over convenience when they remember what they originally swore to protect. As they made their way to Queen Lyralii's new quarters, secure but comfortable rather than punitive, Alex found himself walking beside someone who had somehow managed to transform from prisoner to protected refugee through the simple act of trusting that good people would make right choices when given complete information. Your Majesty, he said quietly, why did you trust me to remember who I used to be? You could have tried to manipulate me into helping you escape. Queen Lyralii's smile was gentle enough to dissolve years of institutional cynicism. Because manipulation would have made me just another person using you for strategic advantage. But recognition means seeing the best version of someone and trusting them to become that person again. 3 days later, Federation Humanitarian Review Board concluded that Queen Lyralii's resistance activities had served Federation interests by preventing environmental disasters and protecting civilian populations. The charges against her were dismissed, and she was appointed as Federation Liaison for Crisis Prevention and Humanitarian Response. Commander Vex was reassigned to positions where his intelligence-gathering skills could be used for actual security threats rather than corporate enforcement. The mining operations Queen Lyralii had opposed were suspended pending environmental impact reviews that somehow had been classified to prevent public scrutiny. Alex found himself promoted to Chief of Humanitarian Security, working directly with Queen Lyralii to prevent the kind of crises that had required their evacuation mission on Kepler 442b. Their professional partnership evolved naturally into something deeper, built on shared commitment to protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. 6 months later, their bonding ceremony was held aboard the Horizon, combining Zephyrian harmony traditions with human commitment ceremonies. Captain Morrison officiated, noting in his remarks that the strongest relationships were built not on meeting someone new, but on recognizing someone you'd been waiting your whole life to find again. Dr. Sarah Chin served as maid of honor, having earned Queen Lyralii's eternal gratitude for providing the research that exposed the conspiracy behind her imprisonment. In her speech, Sarah observed that sometimes the most important intelligence gathering involved discovering who people really were underneath the roles they'd been assigned. And in the ship's official log, Captain Morrison recorded that the Horizon mission had achieved something unprecedented in Federation history, proof that institutional integrity could be maintained when individual personnel had the courage to choose values over orders when the two came into conflict. Queen Lyralii kept the restraints from her detention cell as a reminder of how close she'd come to losing faith in the possibility that good people existed within systems that had been corrupted by bad policies. But she also kept them as a symbol of how recognition could transform chains of oppression into bonds of partnership when someone cared enough to see past the circumstances to the person underneath. I know you, she had said. And Alex finally understood that recognition wasn't about remembering the past. It was about choosing to become the person you were always meant to be when someone believed in you enough to see that potential and trust you to fulfill it. The galaxy, it turned out, was full of people waiting for someone to recognize not who they had become through institutional pressure, but who they could be again when given the choice to serve their values rather than their fears. Alex never did finish reading all those intelligence-gathering manuals Commander Vex had recommended. As it turned out, the most important intelligence was understanding that the strongest chains weren't the ones that bound people to their duties, but the ones that connected them to their consciences and to others who shared their commitment to protecting what mattered most.